Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 episode number 75 based on novel. So let's start. Due to the gap in their abilities, Jiang Nannan couldn't possibly stay on Wu Ming forever. After all, the Golden Crow primordial fire would burn her once her invincible golden body disappeared. As a result, the Golden Crow primordial fire combustion and Golden Crow primordial fire explosion that Wu Ming was going to unleash were sealed even though her martial soul true body was still on display. Jiang Nannan was fighting for this little bit of time for the rest. An orange-gold figure flew out from Hua Yuhao's body at this point. In the next moment, Hua Yuhao arrived in front of Wu Ming. He gently tapped her shoulder. At the same time, Hua Yuhao's Ice Jade Empress Scorpion's third soul ring and the second of his 4 orange-gold soul rings lit up. Jiang Nannan disappeared as Hua Yuhao tapped Wu Ming's shoulder. Her third soul skill helped her to escape after she bought enough time for Hua Yuhao. His palm was gentle, as well as smooth and spotless. As his palm struck Wu Ming's shoulder, her entire body started to tremble. The Golden Crow primordial fire that had broken free from the restraint of the soft bone lock was instantly extinguished, as if a basin of ice water had been poured over it. Wu Ming's body also froze. The golden red faded from her body, and her Golden Crow true body seemed to have been dissipated by Hua Yuhao's gentle palm. Empress Palm. Snowless Glacier. Niu Tian had once mentioned that the only way to avoid the snowless glacier was to avoid being struck by it. The Empress Palm had to make contact before it could take effect. Considering his status as the Clear Sky Sect Master, his appraisal of the Snow Empress Snow Glacier showed how strong it was. Sword and Palm sends the sky into a chill, the Empress Sword, Palm, and Chill. Among these 3 soul skills, the Empress Palm was ranked second. However, it was the strongest among the 3 in terms of its direct offensive strength. After fusing with the Snow Empress spirit, Hua Yuhao no longer possessed Ultimate Ice, but Ultimate Ice and Snow. Among all cold-type soul masters, no one could compare to him. Even without the enhancement of the snowy dance of Ultimate Ice, Hua Yuhao's Snowless Glacier still managed to achieve a temperature of absolute 0. While the Golden Crow true body was very strong, the strength of Hua Yuhao's Snowless Glacier was still exhibited as it struck at such a close distance. Wu Ming felt her shoulder turning numb as it was hit. In the next moment, she discovered that her soul power seemed to have solidified. Her martial soul true body disintegrated instantly, and her entire right arm went numb. A lukewarm feeling started to gush from her shoulder to the rest of her body. Yes, it was a lukewarm feeling. However, it gave her chills. Reversal. Even though Hua Yuhao's palm wasn't enhanced by the Sovereign's descent, it still managed to surprisingly turn the chill into a warm feeling. After Hua Yuhao struck Wu Ming, he also felt something amiss, and pressed his palm down again. As the warm flow returned to his body, both he and the Snow Lady started to shine with bright orange light. The attack was absorbed back into Hua Yuhao. Not only was his soul power restored, but even the Snow Lady benefited greatly. Wu Ming unleashed her Golden Crow primordial fire once again, but her face had turned pale white. She didn't know if she would have survived if Hua Yuhao hadn't absorbed the warm flow in time. However, she knew that it had been gushing towards her heart. What soul skill was that? Wu Ming was stunned. The rest of Shrek 7 monsters didn't continue to attack her after they were informed by Hua Yuhao's spiritual detection. However, the sparring still continued. Just as Wu Ming was struck by the Snowless Glacier, Shu Sanxia also ran into trouble. Chu Qingtian couldn't handle the Turtle God's strike, and was forced back. However, there was still Han Ruoruo behind him. Han Ruoruo lifted her hand as she faced the Turtle God's strike and Hikaitu's high-power cannon shell. A golden ring light was unleashed with her body in the center. She didn't rush to save Wu Ming, as she knew Wu Ming well, and had absolute confidence in her. Han Ruoruo believed that Shrek 7 monsters couldn't defeat Wu Ming easily since she had unleashed her martial soul true body, even if they encircled her. Shu Sanxia didn't have to bother helping them defeat her either. The golden ring looked very simple, as if it were a thick arm. It had a diameter of around 5 meters. However, a shocking scene appeared when the golden ring collided with the Turtle God's strike and Hikaitu's high-power cannon shell boom. Boom, 2 loud booms sounded at the same time. The first to blow apart was the high-power cannon shell. Hikaitu chose to fire at this timing in order to coordinate with Shu Sanxia. As an advanced-level soul engineer, he had great awareness. In addition, he had Hua Yuhao's help. However, the golden ring appeared to be impregnable. The terrifying impact generated by the high-power cannon shell affected the entire sparring arena. A mushroom fog rose over the entire arena, but Han Ruoruo didn't move a single step. The golden ring only shook slightly before it collided with the Turtle God's strike. The Turtle God's strike was a combination of 2 soul skills, and was even unleashed by Shu Sanxia, who possessed the Xuanwu's blood lineage. As it collided with the golden ring, it created an intense whirlpool that generated a suction force. This whirlpool wasn't simple. The suction force could continuously deplete the opponent's soul power. However, The golden ring suddenly divided into three when the turtle god's strike collided with it. They intersected and connected together. As a buzz sounded, they started to be pulled in three different directions. The instant they collided, and as the boom from their collision reverberated, the turtle god's strike was overcome and converted into countless projections of shields. Eventually, it returned to Shu Sanchi's shield. Shu Sanchi cursed, but before he could react further, a streak of golden light had already entangled him. No matter how he tried to struggle and resist with his shield, the dazzling golden rope still dragged him down. He was restrained like a dumpling. Chu Qingtian couldn't give up such a perfect opportunity. He snuck up behind Shu Sanchi, and a panther projection formed by lightning shone brightly before striking Shu Sanchi's body forcefully. Suddenly, Shu Sanchi's body started to flash with lightning. He appeared to be convulsing. As Han Ruoruo flung her right hand, Shu Sanchi was thrown forward. Wang Yang made his judgment. Shu Sanchi had been eliminated. This was the first time the Shrek's 7 monsters attack had ever been stopped once the mysterious underworld displacement was used. Shu Sanchi didn't stand a chance against Han Ruoruo. The rest also started to feel that the dazzling golden rope was going to be difficult to deal with. The rope could loosen, tighten, whip and block. When it tangled, it was flexible. However, it seemed indestructible when it tightened. Han Ruoruo controlled her martial soul very well. Shu Sanchi was defeated before he could unleash his full strength. Although that was partly due to the fact that Han Ruoruo's martial soul was very effective at curbing Shu Sanchi, it was also undeniable that the gap in their cultivations played a huge part in his defeat. Shrek's 7 monsters were stunned, but Han Ruoruo was also shocked. She had defeated Shu Sanchi in the shortest time possible. However, she was appalled to discover that the rest of the 6 were rushing towards her, while Wu Ming didn't move from her spot. What did it mean for the 6 of them to turn their backs on her? It meant that she had been defeated. So quickly, Minga only just showed her golden crow true body. At the same time as she was puzzled, she also became warier. Her eyes turned fiercer, and she snorted. The dazzling golden rope struck forward towards the 6 of them. She was aiming for Huo Yuhao. He Kai-Tu, who was in front of the rest, suddenly stopped. A crisp, clanging sound rang out as he stood firmly rooted to the ground. A circular metal disc appeared beneath his feet. The bottom of the disc was conical, and stabbed right into the granite below. He Kai-Tu stood above this disc. Following this, a large number of soul tools started to combine with his body. In a matter of seconds, he had become a metal monster with countless barrels pointing outwards, all aimed at Han Ruoruo. Among Shrek's 7 monsters, who had the greatest abilities? In terms of explosiveness, it wasn't Bei Bei, Shu Sanchi, Huo Yuhao or Wang Donga. It was He Kai-Tu. He Kai-Tu was already a Class 7 Soul Engineer, which was equivalent to a Soul Sage. Although a Class 7 Soul Engineer was still some way off from a Soul Sage's martial soul true body, the gap was still within the same level. After 5 years, He Kai-Tu once again used a Soul Tool Fort strategy. However, it was on a different level compared to 5 years ago. He lifted a huge, heavy dark gold cannon that was more than 2.5 meters long onto his shoulder. He used the rest of his soul tools to support the weight of this cannon. When the cannon was unleashed, even Han Ruoruo felt a chill down her spine. Other than this heavy cannon, He Kai-Tu looked just like a steel porcupine, as uncountable cannon barrels emerged all over his body. He was practically a metal monster. He Kai-Tu's entire body was completely covered by this soul tool fortress. He Kai-Tu and Huo Yuhao were the only soul engineers among the Shrek's 7 monsters. Huo Yuhao was both a soul engineer and a soul master, while He Kai-Tu was a pure soul engineer. Most of the time, Huo Yuhao was far too outstanding, to the point where he would steal all the limelight away from He Kai-Tu. However, He Kai-Tu had been working hard this whole time, and had been able to casually focus on his own cultivation and research with Huo Yuhao's halo masking him. His improvements and advancements with soul tools over the past 2 years in the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy were definitely comparable to Huo Yuhao's. The other 5 immediately separated, and He Kai-Tu was all by himself as his body flickered before countless beams of light erupted and went straight for Han Ruoruo. Wang Yang was the referee, but even his jaw hung slack at this moment. This explosive attack from He Kai-Tu is way too powerful. Han Ruoruo could feel the imminent threat from her opponent acutely. She finally chose to avoid meeting this force head-on, and opted to evade this attack instead. The dazzling golden rope that was soaring forward suddenly changed direction and plummeted downwards before it planted itself steadily onto the ground, while Han Ruoruo's shook her body subtly before she propelled herself away. One could see from a distance that there was an enormous pillar of light surging forward like a shooting star somewhere high up on the Sea God's Island. This was the effect of He Kai-Tu's Soul Tool Fortress being used at full power. Juxtaposed with the disturbance caused by his explosive shell, the Academy was finally riled up. Everybody else began to move when He Kai-Tu launched this attack. Xiao Xiao began to blow her 9 phoenix worshipping flute once more, and 1 soul ring sparkled on her body as light rippled outward. However, these circles weren't targeting Han Ruoruo, they were going for the Berserk Lightning Panther, Chu Qingtian, who was evading the attack on one side and currently watching He Kai-Tu with a look of astonishment. Chu Qingtian had truly been frightened. He was part of the Shrek Academy's inner courtyard, but this was the first time he had seen a high-level Soul Engineer's prowess. Another person slunk out when He Kai-Tu fired his attack. Jiang Nannan. Jiang Nannan was an agility-type Soul Master, and her lean and slender thighs pushed off the ground and jumped more than 10 meters horizontally. She arrived next to Chu Qingtian after another bounce. Chu Qingtian was also an agility-type Soul Master, and he was even known as the fastest person in the inner courtyard, so his reaction wasn't slow at all. Even though Jiang Nannan had a weaker cultivation, he had already seen the Shrek's 7 monsters' prowess, and he didn't dare to be complacent at all. His body image flashed as he attempted to escape the battlefield. He was still confident in his own speed. However, a dash of golden light suddenly flickered across his eyes right at this moment, and another streak of white light flashed by immediately afterwards. His mind was instantly thrown into a complete blank, while everything around him became blurry. The sky around him seemed like it was spinning round and round, and his body had only just left the ground before he touched down once more. Hua Yuhao's 4th soul ring was sparkling. It was his spirit eye's 4th soul skill, spiritual confusion. All Jiang Nannan needed was this little bit of time. Han Ruoruo had been forced away by He Kai-Tu's assault, who had been positioned towards her right side. This forced Han Ruru to dodge towards the left, while Chu Qingtian was already on the right. This meant Han Ruru and Chu Qingtian were separated the moment He Kai-Tu launched his attack. Han Ruoruo knew that he was in trouble, but it was too late to help him. On the other side, Jiang Nannan had arrived right next to Chu Qingtian. She planted her right foot on Chu Qingtian's abdomen and kicked Chu Qingtian's body until his back arched upwards. Jiang Nannan grabbed Chu Qingtian's shoulder immediately afterwards, while her soft and tender waist flipped backwards, tossing Chu Qingtian heavily onto the ground. There was no need to see what happened next. Their cultivations were similar enough, and Chu Qingtian was disoriented because of Hua Yuhao's spiritual confusion. Jiang Nannan threw another right kick before she used waist bow and threw him into the air. He Kai-Tu's soul tool fortress rapidly turned towards him, terrifying Chu Qingtian, who had just recovered his senses. Fortunately, this was just a practice battle. He Kai-Tu's petrifying cannon barrels flickered once before they returned to normal. Han Ruoruo had been forced backwards, but she responded immediately. Another golden soul ring sparkled as her elegant figure bounced off the ground, and circles of light waved outward. While she defended herself in every possible way, her dazzling golden rope snaked with lightning speed towards Jiang Nannan and Chu Qingtian. Providing aid to their compatriots was the most important role of control-type soul masters. However, Hua Yuhao was also the main control-type soul master of his team. How could he give her this chance? He channeled his spiritual confusion as he reached out with his right hand, and Wang Donga slid into his embrace. She hadn't been doing much throughout the entire battle. An enormous eye with a vertical pupil and tinged with incredibly beautiful colors instantly appeared on the battlefield. This vertical eye's brilliance was far too illustrious, to the point where Han Ruoruo couldn't ignore it. The alarm in her heart paused her forward momentum momentarily, and a golden road immediately stretched out before her. If she hadn't stopped in her tracks, then that golden road would have shone directly upon her. The 3-colored radiance flickered, and the dazzling golden road sprawled horizontally in front of her eyes. The golden road didn't touch Han Ruoruo at all, but it struck her dazzling golden rope. The dazzling golden rope's forward movement ceased, and it grew soft and slack, as if it had lost all vitality. It couldn't complete its rescue mission for Chu Qingtian. Thus, Wang Yang had already ruled Chu Qingtian out of the battle at this point. If He Kai-Tu hadn't shown mercy, this Berserk Lightning Panther would have been cooked. Shrek's 7 monsters chose to divide and conquer even when they were 7 versus 3 against a Soul Emperor, a Soul Sage, and a Soul Doluor, and their plan succeeded. Even Han Ruoruo was unable to save her 2 comrades in time. Even though Shu Sanxia had been kicked out, this exchange of 1 for 2 was worth it for Shrek's 7 monsters. Han Ruoruo paused and stared at the 5 of them who were still maintaining their complete formation, and didn't prevent Jiang Nannan from jumping back to rejoin them. She nodded softly and said, "It's no wonder the Academy granted you all the title of Shrek's 7 monsters for life. We were not nearly as powerful as you guys when we were your age. However, you guys are still young. Let me teach you a lesson." She made this statement very casually, and there wasn't a tinge of outrageousness or arrogance in it at all. It felt as if it was a simple statement of fact, but immense pressure began to rise in the Shrek's 7 monsters' hearts at this moment. Han Ruoruo raised both arms at the same time, and silver light burst forth from her eyes again. The dazzling golden rope spun around her petite frame rapidly, and began to dance. The light became increasingly blurry, and Hua Yuhao realized to his shock that his spiritual detection couldn't reach her anymore. It couldn't pierce those golden circles. Han Ruoruo's dazzling golden rope was charged with spiritual undulations, This was an effect obtained by fusing spiritual power and soul power together. He Kaitu's dark golden cannon barrel sparkled, and golden lights spurted continually. However, he had lost Hua Yuhao's spiritual detection lock-on, and thus wasn't so confident in his shot's accuracy anymore. He was a Class 7 soul engineer, but he was ultimately still a soul emperor. The heavy cannon on his shoulder was a Class 7 soul tool, but one more blast would consume too much of his soul power, possibly more than it had in the previous strike. A pale silver light covered Han Ruoruo's body, and she stared at Hua Yuhao meaningfully before she vanished entirely, along with the mix of gold and silver lights. Countless dazzling golden ropes that were both gold and silver erupted in all directions when she disappeared, blanketing the entire battlefield in an instant. Circles of the same colors rapidly appeared on the ground, and bore towards Shrek's 7 monsters with blinding speed. The dazzling golden true body, faced with the pressure of Shrek's 7 monsters, Han Ruoruo had finally used her martial soul true body. This was also a martial soul true body, but the feeling she gave the 6 of them was vastly different from before. What was different? There was no longer a single target. Wu Ming's martial soul true body was charged with high-temperature golden crow primordial fire, but her original body was still there. However, Han Ruoruo's dazzling golden true body was similar to Chu Qingtian's lightning transformation. She transformed into innumerable dazzling golden ropes. How were they supposed to assault them? Bei Bei was the first to suffer. Bei Bei planted his right foot heavily onto the ground when he realized things were going wrong, then he activated his thunderous dragon head toward the ground. Large patches of lightning spread across the ground as he attempted to impede the dazzling golden true body's advance. However, his attack was completely futile. The dazzling golden true body didn't even pause for a moment amongst the flickering streaks of lightning, and it continued to surge forward. A gold and silver circle of light soundlessly appeared beneath Bei Bei's feet, and a gold and silver beam of light rose into the sky immediately afterwards, sending Bei Bei flying through the air. All his soul power and his soul skills were sealed once he was struck. He was completely wrapped up by the dazzling golden rope once he was tossed into the sky. Han Ruoruo didn't just use her dazzling golden true body. She was their senior sister, and the arrogance and pride in her heart was triggered when Shrek's 7 monsters displayed their prowess. She had also used her 8th and most powerful soul skill, Golden Sky Surge. This was an incredibly powerful domain-like soul skill that could be used on a group of targets or a single target. Jiang Nannan almost instantly followed Bei Bei's footsteps, and was hurled into the air. Xiao Xiao had already laid down her 3 lives soul crush cauldron and attempted to shake off Han Ruoruo's dazzling golden true body. However, her actions were to no avail as well, and both her and her 3 lives soul crush cauldron were sent into the sky. Han Ruoruo had erupted with her 7th and 8th soul skills at the same time. She was a powerful soul Doluor after all, and Shrek's 7 monsters didn't stand a chance if she purely used her strength to overpower them. Hua Yuhao had felt trouble coming the moment she made her move. He still couldn't find out where she was, since Han Ruoruo's spiritual power was comparable to his, and her soul power so much stronger, in addition to the fact that she was using her martial soul true body. Hua Yuhao needed a cultivation of at least 7 soul rings to suppress her with spiritual power. Anything else was impossible. He stretched his arms into a circle and hugged Wang Donga while his eyes lit up at the same time. Another pair of huge dark blue eyes sparkled along with his. The Snow Lady's petite frame instantly enlarged, and the Snow Empress virtual projection appeared behind Hua Yuhao's back. The Sea God's Lake's water around the Sea God's Island began to ripple torrentially immediately afterwards. The air grew moist as enormous snowflakes drifted down from the sky. Hua Yuhao gradually masked his own figure among all those snowflakes. The snowy dance of ultimate ice had finally descended upon the world once more. This was the fusion between the Ice Empress domain of perpetual ice and the Snow Empress snowy dance of the brilliant sun. Both were incredibly powerful soul skills. The temperature across the entire battleground began to plummet. Wu Ming had already backed out of the battlefield, and was already back to normal, but her expression changed in an instant. This was because she was a fire-type soul master, and her perception of this extreme chill was far more conspicuous. She could clearly feel how low the battlefield's temperature had dropped. Bei Bei, Xiao Xiao, and Jiang Nannan had been thrown out of the circle after they were tossed into the air one after another. This was a practice battle after all, and Han Ruoruo definitely didn't want to hurt them. Hua Yuhao and Wang Donga vanished amongst the tremendous patches of ice and frost, and even He Kai-Tu disappeared as well. The ground was covered with gold and silver circles of light in the same instant. Streak after streak of jewel-colored light surged up from the ground and stirred the waltzing snowflakes in the sky in an attempt to find the 3 of them. However, just like how Hua Yuhao couldn't determine Han Ruoruo's location, Han Ruoruo couldn't find Hua Yuhao either within his snowy dance of ultimate ice. Wu Ming's expression was a little sullen. She knew that she had already lost to Hua Yuhao in terms of their elements. The palm she took before this was based on this fact. Her golden crow primordial fire was strong, but it was nowhere near as extreme as Hua Yuhao's ice and snow. Her element had been overpowered, and the formidable chill from that simple-looking strike had defeated her. Go, Ruoruo. While Wu Ming's despondence was extremely ephemeral, her mentality was very strong, and she immediately began to cheer for Han Ruoruo. The gold and silver circles started to transform on the ground. They gradually dissipated, and everything changed into horizontal patterns of light. These patterns began to ripple immediately afterwards, and they swept up into the sky like tidal waves. The turbulent ice and snow was stirred up even more vigorously, and the air was filled with dense, extremely powerful soul power undulations. The ice and snow that were originally concentrated inside the sparring arena were whipped into pieces, and they gradually drifted into the air outside. Han Ruoruo had unleashed her sixth soul skill, Golden Wave. This was an area of effect control type soul skill, and its main function was to dispel. She naturally couldn't dispel Hua Yuhao's domain, but she could still dispel the ice and snow that Hua Yuhao had formed inside this domain with his soul power. The situation immediately descended into an impasse. It was alright if she couldn't find Hua Yuhao, as Han Ruoruo had absolute confidence that he would be the first to drop if this impasse was allowed to continue. He was still a soul king after all, and their cultivations were ultimately still a world apart. Furthermore, Han Ruoruo's golden wave meant that Hua Yuhao's snowflakes were also within the area of effect. This practice combat would be over the moment she discovered Hua Yuhao. We've lost, senior sister. Hua Yuhao didn't attempt to keep this up, and his voice resonated through the air. It was almost like an instant reaction to opportunity. Han Ruoruo's dazzling golden true body immediately pinpointed his location when his voice rang out, and her golden wave transformed back into the golden sky surge and barreled towards them. However, a dark blue streak flickered once in midair, and a crack was forcefully slashed through her golden sky surge. 3 snowflakes rapidly drifted down outside the sparring arena as they revealed their human forms, Hua Yuhao, Wang Donga, and He Kai-tu. Hua Yuhao's face was a little pale, and it was apparent that this was caused by expending too much soul power. The ice and snow swiftly disappeared from the mountaintop, while the gold and silver colors receded, and Han Ruoruo stood all by herself in center of the sparring arena. However, she didn't have the look of elation that she was supposed to have after victory. There was only astonishment. You can break through my golden sky surge? Hua Yuhao's sword naturally wasn't able to break through, but this was only because there was a tremendous gap between their cultivations. Han Ruoruo was absolutely certain that her golden sky surge wouldn't have been able to withstand Hua Yuhao's dark blue sword radiance if they had the same cultivation. That sword had possessed both extreme chill and incredible sharpness. Hua Yuhao forced a laugh and said, I did no such thing. You're too powerful, senior sister. Yes, Han Ruoruo was too powerful. She had almost defeated Shrek's 7 monsters with a single strike. Han Ruoruo, Wu Ming, and Chu Qingtian were still shaken by the Shrek's 7 monsters' prowess. However, the 7 of them seemed a little dull. They had been defeated, in the end. This was what a gap in ability and cultivation meant, and perhaps also what a gap in battle experience meant. Han Ruoruo had been 1 versus 6, but they had had no chance at all. Wu Ming was only knocked out because her element was countered, and she wasn't familiar with Hua Yuhao's abilities. The sparring arena's temperature had dropped from all the ice and snow strewn across the ground. The teachers that came from elsewhere to watch were both stunned and slack-jawed. They came over to emphasize the importance of safety, and they inspected the grounds to ensure that they hadn't been overly damaged before they walked away. Shu Sancha grumbled, Senior Sister Han, you're too brutal. I didn't even get to use my abilities before I was thrown out of the fight. Han Ruoruo snapped, you didn't get to use your abilities? You managed to swap Minga away. What's up with you, Minga? You couldn't even last a little while longer. Wu Ming was even more despondent than Shu Sancha was. I couldn't take it, Ruoruo. I don't even know what soul skill Hua Yuhao used when he hit me with his palm, but my martial soul true body was instantly dispelled. If he hadn't withdrawn his soul power in time, I might have been severely wounded. His ultimate ice is powerful. His element completely overpowered mine. Han Ruoruo's gaze changed a little when she turned towards Hua Yuhao once more. Han Ruoruo hadn't felt at all comfortable inside his snowy dance of ultimate ice either. She was fettered by the low temperature and extreme chill even under the effects of her dazzling golden true body. The snowflakes that descended from the sky possessed formidable offensive strength at the same time, and she had consumed a lot of soul power. The stunning sword that sliced open her golden sky surge at the end also left an exceptionally strong impression. Stop complaining, everyone. Wang Yang came over with a smile on his face. This practice combat was short, but it was spectacular. Bei, Yuhao, you guys lost the fight, but you guys were still glorious in defeat. You guys have to know that Ruoruo is considered one of the strongest among the inner courtyard students, and the gap in cultivation isn't something that can be plugged with numbers. This was a practice battle after all, so it's natural for everyone to feel a little restrained. You guys have already adjusted extremely well. It seems like the 2 years that the few of you have spent apart didn't diminish your chemistry and your tacit understandings. In fact, it was Han Ruoruo, Wu Ming, and Qingtian who were lacking rapport. Ruoruo, you underestimated your opponents from the very beginning, right? Han Ruoruo blushed a little when she met Wang Yang's intense gaze, and nodded slightly. She had indeed underestimated her adversaries. The gap in their cultivations was simply too great, and she possessed a martial soul true body while they didn't, which meant a world of difference. Otherwise, assault-type soul masters would never make the first move in a group battle. It was always the control-type soul masters who unleashed their soul skills first. If she had had a better coordination or chemistry with Wu Ming, then Wu Ming wouldn't have landed herself in that awkward situation. Wang Yang chuckled and said, "And you, Qingtian, you weren't able to display your full power, and your reactions were a little slow. If you had used your lightning transformation the moment Minga was swapped away by that mysterious underworld displacement, she might have been able to escape the soul skills that came afterwards." Chu Qingtian nodded as Wu Ming shot a fierce glare in his direction. It was clear that she wasn't very pleased with his performance. Wang Yang turned towards Wu Ming and said, "Actually, you did a good job. A fight between soul masters means both sides must try their best to suppress each other by maximizing their respective strengths and fortes. However, you have to be clear about what's up with your opponents. Hua Yuhao's ultimate ice isn't a secret, and I know you wanted to fight against it in your heart. The fact that it can be described as an ultimate element already proves his elemental advantage. However, I didn't expect Hua Yuhao to be able to break your martial soul true body. Still, your defeat isn't unfair at all. Even though you're a soul sage, it's not easy to defend yourself against 6 people barraging you at the same time. The only problem was with your mentality. You must have thought that the others wouldn't be able to do anything to you if you unleashed your martial soul true body, so breaking through their siege wouldn't be too difficult, and you could possibly turn the tables on them instead. If you had opted to break through their encirclement instead of facing them head-on, you might have had a different outcome." Wu Ming was initially astonished as she listened to Wang Yang's analysis, but this quickly transformed into admiration and respect. She had felt that it wasn't worth it when Han Ruoruo walked away with Wang Yang that day. Wang Yang was a teacher, but he only had 6 rings, and he was more than 40 years old. It was hard to say whether he could become a titled Doluo in his lifetime. In contrast, Han Ruoruo had already become a powerful soul Doluo at the age of a little more than 30, so she was bound to become a titled Doluo in the future. There was an immense distance between their power and potential. But she had to admit that Wang Yang's observation skills, his perception of people, and his ability to judge abilities were exceptional as she continued listening to his analysis. He was almost able to describe her exact mentality and thoughts. Wang Yang turned towards Shrek's 7 monsters after he was done with the 3 of them. "You guys did alright just now, and your teamwork was a lot better in comparison. However, there were many problems as well. Bei, Sancha, have you guys tried your best?" Bei exchanged a look with Shu Sancha. Wang Yang hadn't given them pointers in a long time, and he hit the right note in his first statement. Wu Ming's eyes widened, and she exclaimed, "Ah, you guys dared to hold back in a practice battle against us." Bei pulled a long face and replied, "How can we hold anything back, Teacher Wang? Aren't you clear about our abilities?" Wang Yang smiled and said, "You are also clear about whether you held back or not. Let's not talk about the fact that your martial souls can mutate. The things you two did on the battlefield were far from the level that your abilities can normally achieve. The 2 of you have the most experience, and have the highest cultivation amongst the 7 of you. Your element might not be as strong as Yuhao's, but the chemistry between the 2 of you is comparable to that between Yuhao and Wang Donga. Sancha used the mysterious underworld displacement during the previous battle, but what about you, Bei? You were treading water from beginning to end. If I'm not wrong, Sancha had the ability to break free when he was entangled. Even though your cultivation is a world apart from Ruoruo's, you shouldn't have lost so easily. I'm fairly certain that you have other moves you didn't use." Shu Sancha and Bei were chided until they could only exchange foolish looks with one another. They really had to respect and admire Wang Yang. Wang Yang smiled and said, "Let me guess what you guys were thinking. I believe you guys wanted to see how everyone has improved, and how their chemistry is like. Not giving your all is also reasonable, as this is a practice combat, after all. I can understand that there are some abilities that are difficult to control once you guys use them. Right your way too perceptive, Teacher Wang." Shu Sancha spoke sincerely. Wang Yang laughed and replied, "I can only see clearer than most. I'm not sure why the 2 of you decided to tread water, but you guys didn't put in as much effort as Yuhao did in terms of cooperating with the team. It's your turn, Xiao. Your performance wasn't good except for the moment when you blocked Wu Ming's attack by displaying impressive controlling capabilities. Your cooperation with the rest was the most insufficient of the entire team. It's clear that you felt like there was nothing much to do during the later parts of the battle, and you hadn't completely integrated into the group, so you didn't unleash your abilities properly. Therefore, the 7 of you practicing together is the right thing to do, yes, Teacher Wang." Xiao responded with a red tinge in her cheeks. She had toiled in her cultivation over the years, and she had learned so much from Elder Xian. But during last season's big competition, Her abilities weren't strong enough, and so she didn't have much chemistry or teamwork with her team in the first place. And over the past few years, she had been focusing on increasing her own strength. Furthermore, Hua Yuhao was their main control-type soul master, and he wasn't familiar with her abilities either, so Xiao Xiao was a lot more ineffective with Hua Yuhao at the helm. Wang Yang turned towards He Kai-tu with a faint smile. Kai-tu, both you and Nan Nan have given me the most pleasant of surprises. It's clear that you have achieved great success with soul tools, and I am certain that you have other even more powerful abilities, but you didn't channel all your energy for safety reasons. Han Ruoruo chimed in and said, yes, he made me feel very threatened. Otherwise, I wouldn't have used Golden Sky Surge directly after using my dazzling Golden True Body. He Kai-tu smiled sheepishly, but didn't say anything. Wang Yang then turned towards Jiang Nannan. Nan Nan, your abilities are becoming a lot more mature. Even though you're not a Soul Emperor yet, you are no longer just an agility-type Soul Master on the battlefield, you are also accomplishing certain controlling functions and capabilities. The person who had the best performance was actually you, and not Yu Hao. The reason is because everyone has a different role in a team, and you fulfilled your role exceptionally well. Jiang Nannan flashed a faint smile, and her enchanting beauty made Shu Sanxia exclaim out loud. Wang Yang finally looked at Hua Yuhao and Wang Donga, but he heaved a faint sigh instead of anything else. Hua Yuhao said, you can speak easy, Teacher Wang. I can take it. I know my performance wasn't good just now. Wang Yang shook his head and smiled. I'm not sighing because your performance wasn't good, I'm sighing because I'm full of awe and admiration. Your abilities are just too incredible. I never thought that you would improve to such a level after 5 years. Even though your performance did have its blemishes, it can be considered quite excellent on the whole. There are a few issues you have to pay attention to. If I'm not wrong, your domain will also affect your teammates, and the most you can do is prevent them from being injured inside, but it will greatly restrict them and their ability to use their own skills. Otherwise, you wouldn't have used that domain so late in the battle, correct? Hua Yuhao nodded. Niu Tian told him back then that his domain was good, but it had an all-around impact, and that extreme chill would affect everything within the domain. He could protect the people inside, but the people under his protection would be restricted to some extent, and they wouldn't be able to exercise their own abilities. Wang Yang continued, I've considered that you guys haven't worked together for a long time, and everyone isn't that familiar with each other's soul skills yet, so your performance can still be considered good. This was especially true when you attempted to suppress Ruoruo in the beginning, and you proved the advantage of having spiritual control. You were also holding back, because I vaguely remember that you have a third eye. Wang Yang turned to Wang Donga afterwards and said, Donga, I want to remind you that you are ranked number 3 in terms of cultivation amongst the entire team. You're a Soul Emperor, and even though you have the advantage of a martial soul fusion with Hua Yuhao, you're not his appendage. During the practice combat, you didn't really use your own abilities at all besides providing support for Hua Yuhao. You also have twin martial souls, and I'm absolutely certain that your 6 soul skills are not useless. Furthermore, you still have your soul bones, and their attached abilities. You should have been able to accomplish much more. Perhaps you wish to assist Yuhao, but please don't attach yourself to him. Hua Yuhao and Wang Donga smiled at each other as they listened to Wang Yang's comments. Wang Donga giggled and said, You've finally said something wrong, Teacher Wang. That is hard to come by indeed. Wang Yang was slightly taken aback, but he quickly understood what was going on. There was a look of revelation on his face as he said, I understand now. You guys were doing all that on purpose. Is Wang Donga supposed to come out only for killer moves and final blows? Wang Donga giggled once more, but didn't say anything else. Han Ruoruo, Wu Ming, and Chu Qingtian felt even more incredulous as they listened to Wang Yang's analysis. These Shrek 7 monsters had already shaken them up during the previous sparring session, and yet, they hadn't given everything they had. What level would they reach if they were allowed to exercise all their abilities properly? Wang Yang said, Alright, you guys can continue to practice. I trust that you guys can do better. Ruoruo, Wu Ming, Qingtian, let's give the place over to them. We've been here for quite a while, okay? Han Ruoruo nodded agreement. Wu Ming and Chu Qingtian didn't object either, and they bid their farewells to Shrek 7 monsters before they departed the sparring arena. They hadn't walked too far when Han Ruoruo whispered to Wang Yang, You said they were all holding back. If they had better teamwork and could exercise all their abilities properly, would they be able to defeat me? Wang Yang laughed and stole a glimpse at her. It's not like you to lack self-confidence. They will probably need another 5 years to defeat you. At the very least, most of them have to have their martial soul true bodies before they can accomplish that feat. Defeating you is not possible at the moment. I did point out that they were holding back, but they were also holding back because you were simply too powerful, and you suppressed them to the point where they couldn't really exercise their strengths. The gap between your cultivations is simply too great. Everything I said before was mainly to give them more confidence. Wu Ming slid in from the side and said, Teacher Wang, why didn't you ask Hua Yuhao about that palm of his? I still don't understand it even now. Wang Yang smiled and replied, That palm is extremely sophisticated. When he reached out with that palm, I could feel that even time itself seemed freeze. He was even able to dispel your martial soul true body. What level of power is that? That means he must be heavily restricted by something. If I'm not wrong, distance is one of the things restricting him, and that palm of his can only take effect within a certain distance. You have to flex your own strengths if you wish to fight against him, and you will be able to use your martial soul true body to the best of its ability if you use your Golden Crow primordial fire at long range. With Hua Yuhao's current cultivation, I don't think he can beat you yet if it's one-on-one. Han Ruoruo thought of something and said, one-on-one? What if it's 2 versus 1? If Wang Donga is added to the mix? Wang Yang shook his head and said, that, I don't know. All I can tell you is that during the last Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament, one of them only had 3 rings, while the other was only had 2, and they still managed to unleash 4 martial soul fusion skills during their final battle. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.